This video is brought to you by NewsVoice. The news is broken. Almost all US media is owned by just a handful of big corporations. Fake news is obviously a huge problem as well, and finding something unbiased can be really hard. NewsVoice is revolutionizing the news landscape. It's an app that gives you a personalized newsfeed by aggregating major news sites, as well as international and independent media, giving some much needed balance. Each news story shows multiple sources, which are all tagged with their bias and perspective. The news affects almost everything in our lives. What we hear and what we read shapes which persons we trust, what we eat, what we buy, how we vote, and even what we think. NewsVoice is created by its readers, as you can upvote stories that you find interesting so more people will see them. It's essentially a democratized platform for news. Plus, it saves you time. You get all the news and all the sources in one app, so that you can be better informed. Oh, and it's totally free. Anyway, get started with NewsVoice today for free through the link below. It's available on both Google Play and the Apple App Store. And let's get into the video. Friends, the story you're about to see is not the script of an Eastern European spy film. It is what has happened and what is happening today in the heart of Russian politics. And the fact is that, to the Russian Federation, the country of matryoshka, vodka, and the mythical Kalinka song, we could just as easily add poison to that list of the country's defining features. Yes, that's right, poison. By now, I'm pretty sure that you have all heard stories like this one.
Russia's Navalny fell ill after drinking from poisoned water bottle in his hotel room, aides say. CNN.
Aleksei Navalny, who we discussed not long ago on VisualPolitik, has basically become the main enemy of President Vladimir Putin within contemporary Russian politics. An enemy who Putin has become more and more obsessed with, as this character has been able to unite the opposition and create what is possibly the strongest alternative to the Russian ruler in a long time. By the way, I'll leave the link to the video that we made recently about Navalny in the description below. Well, the point is that daring to confront the powerful Vladimir Putin has its risks. In a country where the rule of law is virtually absent and the secret services do as they please, it should come as no surprise that the elimination of opponents is commonplace. We're talking about attacks against influential people such as politicians, journalists, activists, and even artists who do not agree with the government. And remember that these attacks don't only happen on Russian soil, but also abroad. Many of you probably remember the case of the poisoning of Sergei and Yulia Skripal in Salisbury, UK, by two Russian agents in 2018, an attack for which they used a nerve agent called A234 from the Novichok group. In other words, we're talking about the fact that we have witnessed real chemical weapon attacks on foreign soil. Now, don't think for a moment that this poisoning is something new in Mother Russia. Not at all. In fact, these techniques have been part of the politics of this country for much longer than you might think. To give you a couple of examples, in 1453, Prince Dmitry Shemyaka was eliminated by poisoning when his chicken dinner was laced with arsenic. In 1610, another Russian prince, Mikhail Skopin-Shuisky, was poisoned by his own wife because the Tsar considered him a threat. And the truth is that since then, poisoning has been a constant in Russia. And in fact, they reached an age of excellence with the arrival of the Soviet Union. Lenin himself, the father of the Russian Bolshevik movement, promoted the creation of a network of secret laboratories to research and develop new poisons. And then, during the Stalin era, many more were added. The most famous was Lab X, popularly known as Kamera. The initial objective of these laboratories was to test and perfect existing poisons, an objective for which they did not hesitate in using live prisoners held in their gulags, who were poisoned with mustard gas, ricin, digitoxin, curare, and cyanide, among many other toxic agents. All of this following closely the style of Dr. Mengele or the Japanese 731 Squadron. And take note, because once they had the knowledge and the capacity, what is possibly one of the most horrible and frightening arms races of the entire Soviet era was set in motion: the chemical weapons race. Listen up.
The Soviets' shadiest heritage.
One question. Why are poisons used against the opposition so frequently in Russia? Well, I'm sure it's pretty obvious. To make sure the obstacle is fully eliminated. But why use poisons and toxic agents instead of other methods? Well, think about it for a moment. We're talking about a fast, silent method with effects on the human body that mimic those of a natural death. And in fact, progress in the creation of lethal substances that could go completely undetected advanced very, very quickly. Between 1928 and 1935, the secret Soviet laboratories of biochemist Grigory Miranovsky managed to create a wide catalogue of tasteless, colourless, odourless, and lethal poisons that could be poured into food or drink without the victim being aware of their presence. Thanks to the advances he was making, Miranovsky became part of the team of Pavel Sudoplatov, an agent of the Soviet NKVD Secret Service, which was dedicated to executing anyone considered an enemy of the state. And this, in fact, was what allowed Sudoplatov and its team to change their modus operandi. They played with bizarre methods like giving away boxes of chocolates containing explosives to simply spicing up an enemy's food or drink with one of their custom poisons. It was so simple that they quickly got the hang of it, and poisoning became one of the main methods of annihilation against dissent in the Soviet Union. By the way, after Stalin's death, Sudoplatov was arrested in the context of de-Stalinization. He spent 15 years in prison. Of course, the Soviets were well aware that such methods were effective, so despite their condemnation, it didn't take them long to devote more and more resources to developing new substances, which were becoming more potent and more difficult to trace. But why on earth did they need other poisons? More discreet ones? Well, friends, the answer to this question is given by historian Boris Volodarsky.
They must make the victim's death or illness appear natural, or at least produce symptoms that will baffle doctors and forensic investigators. To this end, the Kamera developed its defining specialty, combining known poisons into original and untraceable forms. Boris Volodarsky.
Of course, as the poisons advanced, so did medical and forensic techniques. As with doping in sport, it was a struggle, a continuous effort to stay one step ahead. Thus began a whole race to develop poisons more and more secretively. Up until that point, however, it had remained relatively common to use methods such as polonium-210, a toxic substance that leaves a wide trail of radioactive contamination that is easy to track with a Geiger counter. That led the Soviets to launch a nerve agent development program that was unique in the world in the 1980s. Friends, Foliant was born, the program that created the dreaded novichok agents. Novichok, which literally means newcomer in Russian, is a group of highly lethal neurotoxins developed by Soviet scientists in laboratories in northern Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and in Russia itself. Carried in the form of a liquid, powder, or aerosol, they are extremely easy poisons to transport to another country in order to eliminate even exiled dissidents without being detected at international borders. This group of poisons inhibits cholinesterase by attacking neurotransmitters, which are substances in the nerve cells that regulate the essential functions of the body. This causes a failure in an essential organ that can be masked as a coincidental illness. In addition, these poisons have the advantage that, depending on the dose used, can serve both to end life or to scare rivals with warnings, that is, to cause harm without eliminating the adversary. Who could prove in Soviet times that the cause of the ailment was the workings of the state and not just a sudden illness? I assure you that no one could. This is why no one knows exactly how many people the USSR could have been employed with this type of secret operation against opponents and dissidents. But friends, let's be very clear about one thing. The programs and equipment to carry out these operations existed, so surely the victim tally is in the thousands. In any case, what is clear is that today, this modus operandi is alive and well in Putin's Russia as well. Either because he is a tough guy or because he's a former KGB agent, it seems that the Russian president loves to break out the poisons to prove that you are either with him or against him. And in fact, the FSB, the Russian Federal Security Service, has inherited not only the structures, but also the methods of the KGB, and no one seems able or to want to do anything about it. But how is it possible that in the 21st century, and with all the medical advances that have been made, this archaic and ancient method of eliminating adversaries still exists? And another question, is there any reaction or resistance in Russian society when such a case comes to light? Well, let's take a look.
New Russia, old habits.
If there is one thing Putin likes to show off to his friends, it is surely the fact that no one can touch him. The events within and outside Russia, under the presidency of this new species of Tsar, shows us that his methods and his mentality have not stopped evolving every year that he has been at the helm of the Kremlin. The fact is that Putin, who first became president of Russia back in 1999, and since then has not relinquished power, has been crossing more and more ethical and moral lines. For example, in 2004, Russia poisoned the former president of Ukraine, pro-European Viktor Yushchenko when he was in the middle of his election campaign. This was discovered after Yushchenko suddenly developed acute pancreatitis. As a result, doctors in Vienna, where he was treated, discovered such high levels of TCDD dioxin in his body that it became the second highest level ever measured in a human being. A couple of years later, Alexander Litvinenko, a former KGB agent residing in London who was anti-Putin, died of radioactive poisoning. Of course, in order to understand the possible relationship between this event and the Russian government, you have to go back 1 month, to October 2006, when Russian journalist Anna Politkovskaya was shot in the elevator of her apartment. Politkovskaya was an anti-Putin journalist who always got around the threats, censorship, and all the other obstacles the Russian government put in the way of doing her job. That was until she started investigating Putin's crimes in the Chechnya and various corruption cases. That apparently made her a priority target, one that had to be silenced. And in fact, although she was killed in October 2006, a couple of years before that, she had been poisoned on an Aeroflot flight with a poison that remains undetermined to this day. The journalist began to feel very unwell after drinking tea on board the aircraft. However, in that case, the prompt actions of the crew and an emergency landing saved her life. The fact is that Alexander Litvinenko decided, from London, to investigate the strange circumstances of Politkovskaya's death in the elevator of her house, and only a month later, he himself died from poisoning. The method, polonium-210 poisoning, after meeting with 2 Russians in a London hotel who were allegedly business contacts. The trace of radioactivity, however, was left all over the room, and not only that, but also on the stairs of the hotel and in a nearby discotheque, where the Russian agents had been. A towel loaded with radioactivity even turned up in the laundry. All these traces, in fact, were precisely what helped Scotland Yard to know where the killers had been and when the poisoning had occurred. However, if what you've heard already seems serious, the truth is that since then, things have only gotten worse. For example, an activist and journalist who has spoken out against Putin, Vladimir Putin, has been poisoned twice, once in 2015 and again in 2017, becoming seriously ill. Pyotr Vasilyev, a pussy rights activist, suddenly lost his sight, hearing and mobility in 2018 and was later confirmed as having been poisoned when he traveled to Germany for treatment. In the same year, Sergei and Yulia Skripal were poisoned with a nerve agent from the Novichok group in Salisbury, UK, as we mentioned at the beginning of this video. And most recently, as you all know, there is the case of Aleksei Navalny. As you can see, this is a long list of known cases that has escalated in the last 5 years. And that's without counting the cases of poisoning within the country itself and carried out on people not as prominent as the opposition leader. Let's just say that what happens in Russia stays in Russia.
One of poison's great virtues for the politically minded murderer is their capacity to combine easy deniability and vicious theatricality. Even while the murderer denies any role, perhaps with a sly wink, the victim dies a horrific and often lengthy death. A message in a poison bottle. Mark Galeotti, a senior associate fellow at the Royal United Services Institute.
Because friends, one key factor that runs throughout this story is that the cases we know about, we only know about because they either occurred outside of Russia or the victims managed to go abroad for medical treatment. How many more cases can go undetected within Russia itself? It is difficult, very difficult, practically impossible to find out. But okay, at this point, the question that comes up is, and in the meantime, what does the Russian government make of all this? Well, you can probably imagine. Of course, they know nothing, and certainly weren't the instigators. Maybe it was the work of a personal enemy, a fatal attraction situation. Answers that, at the end of the day, are not at all convincing. Listen up.
I've been hearing this argument for like many years, from Politkovskaya to Litvinenko to Skripal, that it could not possibly be the Kremlin, but someone trying to please the Kremlin. But the problem with this argument is that in 2020, the situation is not what it was in 2004, 2006. It's really difficult to imagine that somebody would dare do something that drastic and not first secure some kind of agreement to be sure that he or she is on the safe side. Andrei Soldatov, expert on the Russian security services.
It makes perfect sense, doesn't it? But okay, I'm sure many of you are also asking yourselves, okay Josh, but what about the people? What do the regular Russian citizens think about all this? Well, that question is also somewhat difficult to answer, because the truth is that Russian society, if it has learned anything over the last century, is that when it comes to matters of power, it's better to keep your ears, eyes, and mouth shut. Nevertheless, in spite of this, the Navalny opposition reaped good results in the regional elections on 13th of September 2020. Navalny's allies won regional representatives for the first time in history and made United Russia Putin's party lose the majority in 2 Siberian cities, Tomsk and Novosibirsk. But in any case, the truth is that to express yourself actively is not only something extremely dangerous for Russians in terms of repression and political consequences, it is also difficult for them to find protection. The information blackout in this respect is practically total. So you see, the consequences of going off script are pretty much those you have seen in this video. So from all of the VisualPolitik team, our thoughts and our respect goes to all those people who have lost their lives or have risked their lives fighting for a freer and more democratic Russia. But at this point, how do you think the international community should act against the poisoning of the Russian opposition? Should Russian operations to kill opponents abroad be considered a violation of sovereignty against the foreign nation? As always, we ask the questions and you provide the answers. So I really hope you enjoyed this video. Please hit like if you did, and don't forget to subscribe for brand new videos. Don't forget to check out our friends at the Reconsider Media podcast. They provided the vocals in this episode that were not mine. Also, this channel is possible because of Patreon and our patrons on that platform. Please consider joining them and supporting our mission of providing independent political coverage. And as always, I'll be seeing you in the next video.
And if you want to learn more about politics and hear even more of my lovely voice, you can join us at Reconsider Media. We have a podcast at reconsidermedia.com/podcast. See you there.